My name is Alan Stewart. I am Chief Financial Officer of Tesco plc, and I'm the Non-Executive Audit Committee Chair of Diageo plc, both large UK-based corporates but with international presence, and multinational in the case of Diageo. I've been asked to prepare this short views at the request of Charles Tilley for the IIRC Council discussions to be happening shortly. My views that I'm going to express are very much personal views, but they're obviously ones which come from the perspective of being either a serving executive officer or a serving non-executive officer of those companies. I also have extensive experience, and I'm also a co-chair of the Accounting for Sustainability CFO network under the auspices of the Prince of Wales. These questions which you're about to ask are, to my mind, very deep and obviously very important for the future of the Council and indeed the IIRC. And I would start by saying that I have full credit to IIRC and would really like to give credit to all of those people who, from the very early days, took what was something which was rather nebulous, quite difficult to frame, and got it to the position that it is today, and the hugely successful position it is. I think one of the strengths of the IIRC and the integrated framework was that initially, and even today, it's still very non-prescriptive, and it was the fact that it was non-prescriptive which allowed companies to adopt it in the ways that they first felt would be useful to them, most relevant to them. And then over time, from that non-prescriptive early adoption, they began to see patterns emerging and established practice emerging. And in the sense of getting something which was perhaps difficult and perhaps not mainstream at the time it was first envisaged, it's a great way to think about how we could take this further forward. However, and this is where I think there is another important factor, the move to a more prescriptive basis for the way that companies report and users of reports use them is also helpful, because there is an element of uniformity that's needed. There's an element of comparability that's needed, and I can fully understand and support the degrees to which there's been a more rigorous framework, and some thoughts around even a more rigorous framework today. In terms of the needs of the corporates, I think they need to represent the business in the way we want to represent ourselves. Each business is unique, each has its own ways of working, it's got its own way of describing what it does, it's got its own business model. And really important is the way that we think about that, and the fact that we can apply it easily and consistently within our businesses. However, important also is the fact that there's a framework that we can look to in order to ensure that we're covering what users of the accounts might want to cover. And this is another important point. I think investors, perhaps in the early days, and even maybe today, until very recently, tended to view a lot of what integrated reporting was looking at as something which the governance part of the investor base would cover, and it didn't really make it into the hearts of the fund managers. The decision makers, those with whom executives and management generally interact, and frankly who make the investment decisions. So there is a lot of thought to be done around how the governance and investment parts of the asset managers also need to work much more closely together. Latterly, in the area of ESG, that's definitely come to the fore. Personally, I think it's tremendous, and it's something which in the A4S network we've been working to try to achieve for many years. However, there's also obviously an economic reason behind this, and sifting out the economics from what's really important and why it should be done and how it should be done is also going to need to be a focus. I think the UN SDGs, the TCFD, also really play an important part. They have become almost de facto ways and elements of the integrated reporting framework. And looking ahead, we shouldn't ignore them. A lot of time, a lot of effort, and frankly a lot of thought has gone into those elements. Companies should adopt them and they should form part of the framework. And then finally, from a corporate perspective, The point I would make is that it's incredibly difficult to capture a lot of the other factors, the outside factors, the extraneous factors in any form of report. So whilst culture, values, purpose are all important to a company and they're critical to a company, trying to capture those in any way which is standardized, which is to a format, risks taking the essence of those elements out of the equation and actually risks minimizing them. So those are the challenges, but from a corporate perspective, I think coming back to it, having a framework to operate in, having some rules, perfectly acceptable, but it also needs to be simplified, it needs to be able to be adopted easily, and to the degree that anything new is brought in, the plea from a corporate always would be to stop doing something as well. I think the discussions you have should be very interesting and look forward to hearing what the outcome is in due course. Thanks for taking my views.